I'm Dennis Anderson along with Pamela Fish. Here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
The latest numbers are in, and Minnesota has reached its lowest unemployment rate in 7 years. A positive trend for some, but others say the state has plenty of room to improve its business climate.
What will you do for Lake Superior Day? Well, that's the question organizers are asking at celebrations all around the big lake this weekend.
And we'll have an update on the week's top business news and bring you a story from 25 years ago when the Marines stormed Park Point.
It's all coming up next on Almanac North. Hello and welcome to Almanac North. Thank you very much for watching. Pamela Fish here filling in tonight for Julie. Pam, welcome.
Well, thanks, Danny. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We've got some great topics tonight. Let's get started.
All right, let's. Well, the latest unemployment figures show Minnesota's economy continues to improve. While Minnesota is known as a high-tax state, advocates say that money spent in the right places has given Minnesota a competitive advantage. But critics counter the state could do more to improve its business climate and point to the last legislative session as an example of government passing laws harmful to business. Joining us to debate Minnesota's business climate is Dane Smith, the president of Growth and Justice, a progressive public policy group, and Mike Hickey is the Minnesota director of the National Federation of Independent Businesses. And thanks to both of you for being with us tonight.
Great to be up north.
All right, good.
My pleasure, and what's with the nice weather?
I know it. I know it's so
We love it.
unusual, but we welcome it, and we welcome you as well. And Dane, we're going to start with you and ask you, you say that Minnesota's bucking the trend by being a high-tax state with a growing economy. Tell us a little more about that.
Actually, I wouldn't say that we're bucking a trend. A lot of high-tax states have growing economies. And what Minnesota is doing is outperforming the nation on just report after report after report. Lowest unemployment rate for any twin city, for any metropolitan region. You look at Forbes magazine, which is a pro-business, kind of a conservative organ. It's ranked Minnesota very high, top 3 for competitiveness. We have the fifth fastest growing economy overall. These numbers are just rolling in. As I said in a recent column, I've been, for 30 years before I was at Growth and Justice, I was a newspaper reporter covering politics and government in the state. And in 40 years, I have never seen such an overwhelming consensus that Minnesota is beating the competition.
Mike, can you really buck some of those numbers or statistics coming out of places like Forbes magazine, CNBC, even from the Department of Economic Development?
Well, Pam, there's a lot of studies that say we have a very expensive and bad business climate, but the recent news is good. We all want to have a good economy. The legislature didn't do anything to help, though. They enacted a very high income tax, big income tax increase 2 years ago with a real high 9.85% rate that is really we're going to pay for that in the future. A sky-high minimum wage. $9.50 an hour. It's really going to hurt some of the most struggling small businesses and make it really difficult for teenagers to get a job and keep jobs. There's a training wage there, but a lot of teenagers and students have long-term part-time jobs, and eventually they're going to have to be paid $9.50 an hour, and some of them are going to get priced out of the market, and it's going to hurt those kids and those families. We had a small deficit, the $627 million by Minnesota standards. We've had a yo-yo going on, as you guys know, on deficits. 627 was pretty small by Minnesota standards, so they responded with a $2.1 billion tax increase. They grew spending 11.7% and 17% long-term. Is that going to be our next $1 billion deficit? deficit. Well, we're going to wake up some morning in a year or two and hear about the next projected deficit. So we think they did a lot of things that were harmful to job growth and a good climate for business in the last 2 years.
So why is Minnesota's economy outperforming much of the country?
That would be my question to Mike.
Well, Dennis,
and why have we always outperformed
these
the
policies
country,
just
even
happen,
though
though.
we've had higher taxes for decades? Minnesota has good governments. We invest the money wisely. Minimum wage increases demand for products and services. The middle class is in trouble in this country. They need purchasing power. Aggregate demand drives business. Smart public investment in education and transportation, which business supports. Smart investment in hospitals and healthcare. Smart investments in a clean, green economy, all good for business.
But Dennis, the things I've talked about, though, are going to affect us and harm us long term, and so they just happened. And it's things I think we're going to regret.
We've been complaining, or not we, but small businessmen have been complaining about high taxes for years and years. So what are small businesses getting in return for high taxes in this state?
They get an educated workforce. Minnesota does a better job training its workforce and educating its youth. Small business actually does not speak with one voice on these policies. There's a group called Small Business Minnesota that advocates for the very kinds of policies that have come out of our legislature the last couple of years. I've seen polls that suggest that small business owners are pretty evenly divided between being conservatives and progressives, between Republicans and Democrats. So this notion that small business speaks with one unified voice on these policies is just off base.
Let's take this new 9.85% tax rate. Dennis, we don't represent CEOs, corporate high-paid CEOs in the ivory tower, and we don't represent trust fund babies, but the small business owners that are affected by this are the most successful people who are creating the most jobs and really have the emerging companies. And now they're going to pay the fourth highest rate in the country if they're successful enough, and that's really a negative signal for expanding here, and that's a negative thing for our future. And in the past, Minnesota never had taxes this high. And so this one we're going to regret.
We had much higher marginal rates, 15, 16% back in the 80s, when we were also doing better than other states.
But Dane, where is
We
the
never
help
had anything as high as
where is the help
9.85.
for small businesses that maybe some of the larger corporations get?
Say again? The
Where
question is-
where is there help for small businesses? You know, if they, as Mike says, are getting hit the hardest, where is the help for them?
Actually, Minnesota's Department of Employment and Economic Development does a lot for small business. And they're constantly looking for ways to improve their training, improve their readiness, improve their all aspects of their business. And in fact, the state does things for small business in educating the workforce, in providing direct help for businesses. I think that I was just up on the North Shore talking to a resort owner and also a outfitter who agree with the policies of the last 2 years. And so I know this for a fact. For every anecdote that Mike can provide about someone who's complaining about the size and role of government, I can show you another one who benefits directly from it.
Is northern Minnesota's economy, not the rest of the state now, but northern Minnesota's economy, sufficient to keep high school and college graduates living and working here in this part of the state?
Well, we want to improve it. The PolyMet project, is a huge thing. If that could get approved, that would be a dynamic thing for the range. People are just so disgusted with it. It goes on and on. But that would be an example of a project that would have a big impact.
I was struck by a letter to the editor yesterday in the Duluth News-Tribune where a writer said, given all of the help wanted signs and all of the get your applications in now signs, is there anybody who's on welfare anymore? In other words, this writer seems to suggest that this economy is doing very well. And in fact, northeastern Minnesota has always depended a little bit more than other regions on public investment, on infrastructure in particular, and highway construction. And because it's a rural region, and this is typical all over the country, public investment, government and taxes is a bigger percentage of the economy. So it actually depends on government.
Let's talk a little bit about healthcare, because that obviously is one of the biggest expenses out there. MNsure, is it a failure or a success at this point, Mike?
Rough start. Off to a rough start. We have several complaints about the MNsure law. First of all, there's the problems with the rollout, which is more of a technical problem. Hopefully they're getting that resolved. But we think we have a terrible health insurance exchange law. They put a new tax on small businesses and individuals only, not on Fortune 3.5%, not on, their premiums are expensive enough, and not on Fortune 500 companies, and not on many government self-insured plans doing. They did that knowing that this inequity exists, and that's disappointing. The MNsure board is really unaccountable. It ought to be under the control of the legislature. They're exempt from the normal rulemaking process. They have something called the active purchaser provision, where they can exclude insurers who are otherwise qualified under Obamacare, which is pretty tedious requirements. There's just a lot of things. The MNsure needs a complete overhaul. And I think it's going to get a lot of discussion in the governor's race. Governor Dane's going to try to tell everybody that MNsure is going well, and it's not. The rollout was a disaster, but just the law itself really needs to be changed. I hope it is in the
Dane,
future.
what would you say to that?
Well, Mike's glass there is about half empty and mine's about half full.
Mine is being drained, Dane.
Mike and I have known each other for years. We have a good relationship and a respectful one. Minnesota has cut in just 6 months its percentage of people who lack insurance in half. This is an amazing step forward. We couldn't get past 15% uninsured for many years. Minnesota Care, which NFIB backed, and I applaud him for that, brought it down. This is another leap forward in reducing the percentage of people without insurance. And people with health coverage are better employees, they're better citizens, they're going to be, it's going to be good for the economy. And they've pushed past 250,000 people now insured by MNsure. It's going to be good for business in the long run, less demand for employers to provide insurance. And I think we're moving in this country with Obamacare towards a system where employers no longer have to do health insurance
Employers
themselves.
must be hiring 8,500 new jobs in June.
Yes, absolutely. I think this is a testament to policies that are aimed at reducing inequality, which is a big problem.
Obamacare is not helping this economy. It's a drag on this economy. Spending all this money subsidizing people's health insurance, you're going to get a good result, and that's the one positive. But there's about 11 to 12 new taxes on the economy and on successful entrepreneurs, some of those. So that's the trade-off. But it's good to have, you spend a lot of money and subsidize people's health insurance, you are going to get a positive result. But we got to look at what price.
I think
the employer mandate, the penalties, and the employer mandate is really making a lot of employers tentative about expanding, and that has really been a drag on the economy.
I just
To the
think
point where the president suspended it. As another thing he did without the authority, he suspended it. Now it's 100 or greater.
we are doing much better than states that are refused to comply with ACA. Wisconsin and Kansas are two examples where governors have pushed through really radical tax cuts and have declined to enact the ACA reforms, and they are not doing as well as Minnesota.
Well, they have to.
Not
They
nearly-
have to do
not
the
nearly as
reforms.
well.
They have to do the reforms. That's a national law. We'd be better off with the federal exchange. MNsure is being run so poorly right now,
Which I
and
think
in the law for the
NFIB
reasons I
opposed,
cited.
right? You
Boy, I
oppose
bet-
the national
I
legislation.
bet you guys could go on for a much longer time. Unfortunately,
How much time do we have?
We're
That's
out
it.
of
We're out
time.
of time.
That is it. That is it, I'm afraid. But thank you so much for a lively debate. We sure appreciate your thoughts, both
Mike?
of
Now
you.
we're taking this out in the parking lot, right?
Mike, Dane, thank you very much.
Thanks very
you.
much.
Now, let's dig into our news file archive for a look at what was making news 25 years ago this week.
U.S. military intervention expansion since World War II has been regular and deadly. Outside the Soviet Union's own border states,
Park Point heated up today as peace activists went head-to-head with military supporters. And just when the Marines were to take center stage, the real action began. Eight people were arrested this afternoon. 7 were charged with disorderly conduct, 1 with a felony because the officer who arrested him chipped his tooth.
Landing went off as well as could be expected. We also, because we did set up a perimeter, a safety zone, and cooperating with the military, we expected there might be somebody who would be a little over-exuberant.
After it was all over, peace activists said their protest was justified.
Were you standing up there when they started shooting those guns? Did you see how they looked? Can you imagine what it would feel like to have that be real? To be in a country where they're shooting at you, your children? Just think. It's terrifying.
Lisa Molosky, KDLH News.
The third Sunday of July is set aside each year for Lake Superior Day. Now, this Sunday will mark the 11th year of celebrating the Big Lake. A variety of events have been happening all week leading up to the big day, and celebrations will happen on all 4 shores of the lake: Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Ontario, Canada. The theme this year is "What Will You Do for Lake Superior Day?" Joining us is Konnie LeMay, the editor of Lake Superior magazine, one of the sponsoring organizations, and Andrew Slade is the Northeast Minnesota Program Coordinator of the Minnesota Environmental Partnership. Thank you for being here. Konnie, why is it important that we celebrate Lake Superior?
Well, you know, Lake Superior, some people say that we take it for granted up here because it's there all the time and we just don't recognize it. The truth is, I don't think we do take it for granted. It's in our hearts and souls. It's much a part of us. But this is an opportunity to take the day and think about the lake, what the resource is, what it brings to us. The other cool thing about Lake Superior Day, and we've been celebrating it here for about 11 years in our area, but it actually started back in the 90s by a group up in Thunder Bay, Canada, in Ontario. And the cool thing about Lake Superior Day is on Sunday, there will be celebrations all around. So we are all uniting and being the one large group around Lake Superior.
Andrew, let me ask you, because you've studied the lake for some time, what is it important for people to learn about Lake Superior?
You know, there's the basic facts about biggest and coldest and deepest and all that kind of stuff, and that's a great place to start with it. But if you turn it back around, people need to understand how important it is to our economy, to our culture, you know, to every part of our thing. I ask people, you know, imagine what would happen if it just went away, you know, that answers a lot of those questions right away about the importance. You know, our entire economy, not only in Duluth but really lake-wide, is based on having a lake that the boats can go across and a source for drinking water.
So, what can people do to celebrate the Big Lake?
Well, we have lots of things happening locally. Down at the Marine Museum, Saturday and Sunday now, there'll be booths, tables with information, activities for children. On Sunday at 2 p.m., I'm really encouraging people to go to a free showing of Mysteries of the Great Lakes. It's at Cinema 2 and sponsored by the Duluth Seaway Port Authority, and we have this great documentary film about the Great Lakes. Much of it is based on Lake Superior, and that's a free showing of that, so that's one of the things you can do. Some people are going to be helping to clean the beaches around the area. Many local churches are having stewardship of the lake as one of their focuses for this Sunday sermon.
Is there a lot of cleanup needed?
You know, there's always beach sweeping that's needed. It's not like we have a lot of garbage around. We're pretty good about not just tossing litter out. Although I do have to say, one of the things that people could help a lot by is if you smoke, do not throw your cigarette butts out of the car. You would be surprised at how much of that is the stuff you clean up at the beaches. We've actually had divers doing underwater beach sweeps, and cigarette butts are one of the major things they find. So you do have to be careful. And if you live up in the Heights by where I am, up in the Duluth Heights, everything that's in your yard washes down to the lake. So make sure your yards are clean.
I would assume that the big lake is what attracts tourists to Duluth and Superior. Just give us a little idea, if you can, about the size of tourism here in the Twin Ports.
Boy, I don't have the numbers for that. It was interesting. Was it 2 years ago when we had the big flood?
Yes.
It was about 2 weeks after the flood where the word was out, Duluth is flooded, the lake was full of grit, there's nothing happening, you couldn't get on the trails. And boy, the number of visitors just dropped. You know, it bottomed out right then. So I think that's a great indicator right there of how important having a clean, accessible Lake Superior is for the tourism industry.
Konnie, as editor of Lake Superior magazine, do you know how many tourists come to Duluth a year?
We were just talking to Visit Duluth this week, and I believe their numbers are about 3.5 million visitors who come. A good number of them from the Twin Cities, but many of them from all over the world. And that's what we find with our magazine too as well. We have subscriptions in 20 foreign countries. That's because people all over the world are interested in Lake Superior.
The lake is a magnet.
Yep, it certainly is.
And you have organizations beyond the Lake Superior immediate area that are involved in this celebration, is that correct?
Locally in Minnesota, we've really been active and had a really great group, and we have about a dozen different organizations. There's the Minnesota Lake Superior Coastal Program, the Minnesota Sea Grant, the DNR. This year, the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission from Wisconsin has come over, and they've set up tables down at the Marine Museum as well. The Forest Service, everybody touching the lake, and the lake touches everyone, so we have a large group.
Andrew, what is the general health of Lake Superior?
Well, it's interesting. I wanted to go back to that. You know, Konnie was talking about the early history of Lake Superior Day, and it actually came about at the same time that some of the first big environmental protection sort of visions for Lake Superior were emerging. It was in the early 90s when Lake Superior Day got going, but also it was in the early 90s where governments around the lake committed to what's called the Zero Discharge Program for persistent toxic pollutants. And that's a whole long, it was a nasty 9, a list of 9 different chemicals we're trying to eliminate from coming in the thing. Well, there's, you know, most of those are still in the lake. You know, there's still actually DDT entering Lake Superior. There's still mercury entering Lake Superior. You know, you could drink the water, but in a lot of places you don't want to eat the fish. And why is that? You know, because of the working up to the food chain. So there are still pretty, some still pretty serious issues with the water quality.
But how far have we come? I mean, in present day, what would you say how that compares to, say, 11 years ago?
Come a long way. Yeah. Come a long way, right? And you know, some of those nasty 9, you could probably even take off the list at this point. We're close to that.
Yeah.
But
every once in a while we hear a diversion of Lake Superior water. Somebody wants it maybe down in the Southwest or even another country.
Right.
Is that still a concern?
Yeah, if I may, you know, that's another example of, again, people from around Lake Superior and around the Great Lakes coming together. They after there was a proposal to take bottled water out of Sault Ste. Marie, and everyone across the Great Lakes was so shocked by that that it actually led to governments of all the states and provinces coming together to pass a treaty, essentially the Great Lakes Compact, that makes it so that if you want to take water out of Lake Erie, you have to get permission from the state of Minnesota to do that, and you won't get that permission.
You won't get that.
Now, were you the two that were out there getting quotes, why I love Lake Superior today? Did you get any of those?
We did. I have to say Minnesotans in general are very shy people. So we had to do a little bit of arm twisting, but we did get
Give us an example.
we got some really fun responses. It was interesting to hear some people because there was a woman from Florida, for instance. It was the first time she'd ever seen the lake, and so she was talking about how magnificent and beautiful it was, and you know what a surprise it is to have a freshwater body like that. There were even some little girls who, when we were asking them, well, what do you like about Lake Superior? It's big, it's blue, and it's pretty broad responses.
I was in the Rose Garden the other day talking to someone from Oklahoma who said it looks like an ocean. It does.
It does, and it acts like an ocean. One of my favorite quotes from a researcher is that Lake Superior is an ocean in a bottle. It behaves very much like an ocean in many ways, but because it's confined, it's an interesting research topic.
Sure. Konnie, Andrew, thank you very much.
So
we have to run.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. All the best for this weekend.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's time now for the week's business headlines from Business North. David C. Olson, president of the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce since 1991, died Wednesday after a fight with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Olson was a frequent visitor to northern Minnesota and had established a strong following with the area's business community. He was passionate about doing the right thing and worked hard to bring people on opposite sides of an issue to the table, said board member Bill Bennett, CEO of LHB in Duluth. He wasn't afraid to take tough stands, but never let the issues become personal, according to Mike Lundstrom of the Hermantown Chamber. Duluth Chamber President David Ross said Olson was widely respected and will be hard to replace.
The Leibovitz School of Business and Economics at UMD has established a new major in entrepreneurship and will begin admitting students this fall. It will offer upper division classes in entrepreneurship, management, marketing, finance, and business law. The program will also include mentoring, business plan, competitions, and field trips to entrepreneurs' companies. Graduates will receive a Bachelor of Business Administration degree.
A candidate for Wisconsin governor has filed an appeal to stop construction of 3 oil storage tanks that Enbridge Energy wants to build in Superior. Democrat Brett Halsey complains they will store dirty explosive oil from the Bakken fields. He says storing it will emit benzene and other carcinogenic fumes and allow more of the crude to flow through Wisconsin pipelines. An Enbridge spokesperson said several air monitoring stations will be near the tanks and argued that pipelines are the safest transportation option and that Enbridge will strive to have 0 leaks. For more on these and other stories, visit businessnorth.com.
All right, do you have a comment on our show? Dial 218-788-2849 and leave a message, or send your remarks in an email to almanacnorth@wdse.org. You can also visit our website for the latest program information, news about the station, or to catch up on the shows that you've missed. And Pam, great as always to work with you. You will be back someday.
Yes, great to be here. Thanks, Denny.
All right. Thank you. For Pam and the crew at Almanac North, I'm Dennis Anderson. Have a great weekend, everybody. Good night and be kind.